Lena's life had always been one of quiet routine. She had never craved excitement, and the peaceful simplicity of her job as a librarian in the sleepy town of Eldridge suited her just fine. The town itself, small and mostly untouched by time, held little more than a few aging buildings and narrow streets that had long forgotten the footsteps of the past. The library was the heartbeat of the town, a place where memories, both old and new, were preserved for those who cared to look. But for Lena, it was a refuge, a place where books became her world, and the world outside, full of chaos and unpredictability, faded into the background. One late afternoon, as the shadows of dusk stretched across the library's stone walls, Lena sat at her desk, sorting through the latest batch of donated books. The smell of aged paper filled the air, comforting her as she worked in solitude. The library, as usual, was empty save for the occasional visitor, and today, that visitor didn't arrive at all. As Lena reached for a thick leather-bound book, a sudden flutter caught her attention. A single piece of yellowed paper slipped from the pages, falling to the floor with a soft thud. Intrigued, Lena bent down to retrieve it. The paper was brittle, its edges frayed by time, and it had clearly been forgotten, its importance lost to the years. But something about it called to her, an invisible thread tugging at her curiosity. The letter was sealed with an unusual wax insignia, embossed with a design she didn't recognize. It was the sort of seal you only saw in history books, outdated, mysterious, and utterly out of place in a town like Eldridge. Lena's hands shook slightly as she carefully opened it, the wax cracking under her fingers. The handwriting inside was elegant, almost too perfect for something from the 1800s. The contents of the letter were cryptic and ominous. Written in an archaic, yet still legible script, the letter spoke of a secret that had been buried beneath the town for generations. It began by addressing someone named H.R. Whitmore, a name Lena didn't recognize, and then delved into a strange account of an event that occurred long ago, an event so dangerous that the letter warned it must never be brought to light. Detail. Letter revealed that in the heart of the town, beneath the very stone foundations, something had been hidden away, a truth so destructive that those in power had gone to great lengths to suppress it. The words were clear in their warning. The key to the truth lies beneath the clock tower. Lena's heart raced as she read the words. A truth buried beneath the clock tower? She had grown up in Eldridge, and like most of the town's residents, she had always known the clock tower as little more than an old landmark, its tall, crumbling stone structure standing proudly at the center of town. She had heard the stories of how it had once been a symbol of prosperity, but had fallen into disrepair after the town's economy had slowed in recent decades. Now it was a place that few visited, its inner workings long forgotten, and its bells silent. The letter spoke of the town's founding families, their connections to a powerful and influential group that had shaped Eldridge's history for centuries. It mentioned a secret society, an underground network of elites who had maintained control over the town and its people. The letter didn't go into details about the society's purpose, but it hinted at a cover-up so vast, so deeply entrenched, that it had gone unnoticed by generations. Lena's mind raced as she absorbed the letter's contents. What was this truth, and why had no one ever mentioned it? The town, its people, its history. Everything she thought she knew about Eldridge now felt like a fragile facade. She couldn't just let this mystery fade into oblivion like so many others. There was something in her, an inexplicable pull that told her she had to find out more. But what could a simple librarian like her do? Why had this letter been placed in the book she had been cataloging, as though it had been waiting for her to find it? The questions only deepened the mystery. She looked down at the letter again, her eyes drawn to the wax seal which seemed to stare back at her with silent accusation. Whoever had hidden this letter, whoever had left her this puzzle, had clearly expected her to be the one to uncover the truth. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. There was no turning back now. She couldn't just ignore it. She needed answers, and they were buried somewhere beneath the clock tower. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared from the library windows, Lena stood up, her mind made up. She had to go to the clock tower. Whatever secrets it held, whatever danger awaited her, she couldn't let it remain locked away any longer. The letter had chosen her, and now she had no choice but to follow its cryptic instructions. But as she left the library, a nagging feeling settled in her gut. What if this decision changed everything? What if some truths were better left buried? The next morning, the weight of Lena's discovery lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive. The letter had stirred something inside her, a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. For the first time in her life, Lena felt as though she were on the edge of something far greater than the quiet routine she had grown accustomed to. The clock tower, its faded stone exterior and silent presence, had always seemed like just another relic of the past. But now, it felt like a doorway to something hidden, a piece of the town's history that no one had dared to unearth. With a mix of trepidation and determination, Lena set out for the clock tower, her footsteps echoing down the cobbled streets. The town was still sleepy at this hour, and the early morning fog clung to the ground, wrapping the world in a cold embrace. The air felt thick, as if something was watching her, waiting. She had always passed by the tower on her way to work, but today it seemed different, more ominous, more alive with secrets. When she reached the clock tower, Lena paused, taking in the crumbling structure that loomed before her. The tall, narrow building was covered in ivy, its surface pitted and worn by the ravages of time. The clock face, once a symbol of precision and order, now sat broken, its hands frozen at an hour long forgotten. The tower stood alone in the center of the town square, a reminder of Eldridge's once thriving past. Lena hesitated for a moment before pushing open the rusted door. It creaked in protest, but the sound was swallowed by the thick silence of the tower. Inside, the air was musty, and the dim light from the small windows barely illuminated the space. Dust particles floated in the stagnant air, drifting lazily in the shafts of light. She felt a chill crawl up her spine as she took her first step into the tower, the heavy door groaning shut behind her. The interior of the clock tower was a labyrinth of old, rusted gears and broken machinery. The walls were lined with centuries-old wood, cracked and splintered from years of neglect. The faint smell of oil and metal mixed with the mustiness of the space, creating an atmosphere that felt both eerie and intriguing. Lena's heart raced as she looked around, her mind already beginning to piece together what the letter had hinted at. A hidden secret buried beneath this very floor. She had no idea what she was looking for, but something in her gut told her it was here. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the massive gears and clock mechanism at the center of the tower. The heart of the machine was still intact, despite the obvious signs of decay. The sound of the clock's faint ticking echoed through the empty room, as if the tower itself was alive, waiting for something to happen. Lena walked toward the center, her boots clattering against the wooden floor. And then, at the edge of the massive gears, something caught her eye. It was a small, almost imperceptible crack in the stone wall. Lena approached it, her breath shallow. As she examined the crack more closely, it was narrow, almost too small to be a door, but it seemed out of place. There was something deliberate about it, as though it had been made to look like just another imperfection in the tower's structure. Without thinking, Lena pressed her fingers against the crack, and to her surprise, the stone shifted under her touch. The wall groaned as if alive, and with a sudden click, a hidden compartment was revealed, barely visible to the naked eye. Inside, there was a small wooden box, old and worn, with a brass lock. The brass was tarnished, but the lock was still intact. The key. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had found it. The key that had been mentioned in the letter, the one that held the truth. Her hands trembled as she reached for the box. The air in the tower grew heavier, thick with anticipation. She carefully opened the box, and inside, there was a set of yellowed photographs, a folded map, and the strange metallic key that had been described in the letter. The photographs were black and white, some faded almost to the point of obscurity. They depicted people she didn't recognize, all of them standing around the clock tower in different time periods. There were no names written on the backs of. The photos and the faces seemed distant, as though the people had long since disappeared from history. But one photo caught her attention. It was of a man, dressed in formal attire, standing in front of the clock tower with a confident smile. His eyes, however, were cold, calculating, like he knew something no one else did. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. The map was old, the paper brittle and torn at the edges. It depicted the town of Eldridge, but it was different from the map Lena had grown up with. Certain places were marked in red, some familiar, some completely foreign. Lena's eyes lingered on the places marked in red. These were the locations she had to visit. But why? What could be waiting for her at these spots? Finally, she picked up the metallic key. It was heavy in her hand, and its surface gleamed under the dim light. The insignia engraved on it matched the wax seal from the letter. It felt like the key to a door she hadn't even begun to open. As Lena stood there, holding the box and its contents, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her. The truth she had uncovered was more than just a secret. It was a thread woven into the very fabric of Eldridge's past, and now it was hers to unravel. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the tower, snapping Lena out of her reverie. She spun around, heart racing as the sound of footsteps echoed from below. Someone else was in the tower with her. She wasn't alone. Before she could react, the door to the tower slammed open, and a figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the fading light. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This was the man from the clock tower, the same one from her dreams, the one who had warned her in the letter. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice a low growl. "And now you've made a dangerous choice, Lena." Lena's pulse quickened as the man stepped forward. His eyes were filled with something dark, something unspoken. The tower had been waiting for her, and so had he. The question now was, would she be ready for the truth? The man who had entered the clock tower seemed to materialize from the shadows, his presence filling the room with a palpable tension. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, and she instinctively took a step back, clutching the wooden box tighter. The eerie ticking of the clock, once a steady reminder of time, now felt like the ticking of a time bomb. Each second was drawing her closer to an unknown danger. The man's eyes were cold, focused, and intense, and Lena could feel the weight of his gaze, as though he could see straight through her. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said, his voice low and gravelly, but laced with an undeniable authority. "You've uncovered something you weren't meant to find." Lena froze. She had expected to be alone in the tower, to uncover secrets hidden away from the world. But now, standing before her, was someone who seemed to know exactly what she had discovered. And worse, he knew who she was. The air around them thickened, a strange mixture of fear and curiosity curling inside her chest. How did he know her name? Why was he here? "I don't understand," Lena stammered, her voice shaky. "I found this letter. It led me here. It said something about a secret beneath the clock tower. I thought I was just uncovering history." The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with a look of disdain. "History? You think this is history?" "No, Lena. This is a conspiracy, a dangerous one. You've opened a door that has been sealed for generations." Lena's thoughts raced, her mind struggling to grasp the implications of what he was saying. What conspiracy? What had she uncovered? The letter had hinted at something buried deep within the town's history, but the scope of it was becoming clearer by the second. This man wasn't just some random stranger. He knew exactly what she had found, and he wasn't the only one. The key, the map, and the photographs, everything she had uncovered was part of something far bigger than her simple curiosity had led her to believe. "You don't understand," the man continued, his voice growing colder. "You've made a mistake? A big one." Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. But the more she spoke, the more she felt like a fool for ever thinking she could uncover the town's secrets on her own. This wasn't just a mystery, it was something far more dangerous, and now she was tangled in it, whether she liked it or not. The man let out a slow, mocking laugh. "No one does. That's the point. The truth has been buried, Lena. The town's elites have made sure of it, and now you've unwittingly become a part of it. You'll never be able to walk away from this. You're in too deep." Lena's mind raced. The elites? Who were they? What truth was he talking about? She could feel herself starting to drown in a sea of questions with no answers in sight. But one thing was clear. Whatever she had discovered, it was far bigger than she had anticipated. The weight of the box in her hands felt heavier now, as though it contained not just forgotten memories but the very foundation of a conspiracy that had shaped the course of the town's history. "Who are you?" she finally demanded, finding her voice amidst the storm of uncertainty. "Why do you know so much about this?" The man's lips curled into a thin smile, one that was both eerie and unsettling. "My name is Nathaniel. I've been watching you for a while now, Lena. You were never supposed to find that letter. It was meant to stay hidden, just like everything else." Lena took a step back, trying to make sense of his words. "You've been watching me?" "Yes," Nathaniel replied with a cold finality. "I've been watching you and others like you, those who might one day stumble upon the truth. See, this isn't just about a secret buried in the town's past. It's about power. Power that has been hidden from the public for centuries." Lena felt her knees weaken as the full scope of his words sank in. Power? What was he talking about? Who held the power? And why had it been concealed for so long? "The key you found," Nathaniel said, his voice lowering to a near whisper, "is the symbol of that power. The people in charge of this town, people whose names you wouldn't even recognize, have been pulling the strings behind the scenes for generations. They've controlled the economy, the politics, everything. And now you've uncovered the key to their greatest secret. You've found the beginning of the end." Lena felt a cold shiver run through her. She couldn't fully comprehend the enormity of what Nathaniel was saying, but one thing was clear. She had just unearthed something that was never meant to be discovered. And now it was coming for her. "Why did you warn me?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "If this is all true, then why don't you just let me go?" Nathaniel's gaze hardened, his expression becoming unreadable. "Because, Lena, you're not just some bystander in all of this. You've become a part of it. You can't undo what's been done. The people who've buried this secret will stop at nothing to keep it hidden. If you want to survive, you need to make a choice. Walk away now and pretend you never found the letter, or face the consequences of exposing the truth." Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She had thought she could walk away, that she could ignore what she had uncovered and return to her normal life. But Nathaniel's words hung in the air like an inescapable truth. There was no going back. She had opened a door and it would not close again. "Which will you choose, Lena?" Nathaniel asked, his voice filled with an unspoken challenge. In that moment, as she stood in the dark, cold tower, Lena knew that whatever decision she made would determine the course of her life. The secret, the key, and the conspiracy had already entwined her fate. Now she had to decide if she would be part of it, or if she would stand against it. The days following her encounter with Nathaniel felt like a whirlwind of confusion and danger. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been irrevocably changed. The town she thought she knew, its quiet streets, its charming old buildings, its everyday people, suddenly felt foreign, shrouded in a dark mystery that she could no longer ignore. Each step she took seemed to lead her deeper into a web she had never asked to be part of. She couldn't return to her old life. Nathaniel's warning echoed in her mind. You've become a part of it. And it wasn't just Nathaniel who seemed to know about her discovery. She could feel the eyes of the town on her, the subtle whispers of strangers in the street. the fleeting glances that were quickly averted when she caught them looking. She was being watched, she knew it. But by who? Who else was involved in this conspiracy? Who else knew about the secrets buried beneath the clock tower? Lena had no answers, only questions, questions that seemed to grow with every passing day. But one thing became clear. She couldn't face this alone. It was late one evening when she found herself wandering the streets near the library, lost in thought. The air was cool, the faint hum of the town's nightlife just beginning to stir. That's when she saw her, Claire. Claire was standing at the entrance of an alleyway, a figure in the shadows, waiting. Lena had seen her before, in the library and around town, but never in such a mysterious, purposeful way. Something about Claire had always seemed different, like she carried a quiet burden, one that matched Lena's growing sense of unease. Lena had often wondered who she really was. When Claire saw Lena approaching, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the street quickly, ensuring they were alone. "Lena," Claire said, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to talk." Lena stopped, her heart racing. You've been following me." Claire nodded, her expression serious. "I've been watching you for a while now. I know what you found, and I know what it means. You don't understand the gravity of what's happening here." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "Who are you? Why have you been following me?" "I'm someone who's been trying to protect the truth, and I know how dangerous it is to expose it," Claire replied, her gaze never leaving Lena's face. "You're not the first person to stumble upon this, but you might be the last if you don't start listening to people who've been fighting this for years." Lena's mind raced. "What do you mean by fighting this? What's really going on here?" Claire motioned for Lena to follow her down the alley. Reluctantly, Lena obeyed. They moved quickly, the street lamps casting long, eerie shadows around them. Claire led her to a hidden doorway at the back of an old building. It looked like just another forgotten part of the town's infrastructure, nothing more than a storage closet or utility room. But as Claire opened the door, Lena realized this was no ordinary room. Inside was a small, dimly lit space, cluttered with maps, old files, and photographs. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings, all with one theme in common: the town of Eldridge and its history. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine as she looked at the images. People she didn't recognize, buildings she had passed by every day. But what struck her most were the red X's marked on some of the photographs, symbolizing places and people that had been erased from public memory. "What is all this?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This," Claire said, picking up a dusty folder, "is the resistance. The people who have been trying to uncover the truth about Eldridge for decades. We've been fighting the conspiracy that controls this town, trying to expose the corruption, the cover-ups, and the people who've been in charge all along. And now, Lena, you're a part of it." Lena felt a chill spread through her as she processed Claire's words. "What do you mean, I'm a part of it? I didn't ask for any of this. I just found a letter. I just stumbled on something that led me here." Claire's eyes softened, but there was no denying the gravity of the situation. "That letter you found wasn't an accident. It was meant for you. It's a message, a call to action. And whether you like it or not, you've become involved in something that goes far beyond what you could have imagined. Lena shook her head, still struggling to understand. But why me? Why did it come to me? I don't know exactly, Claire admitted. But I've seen it before. People who uncover pieces of this puzzle are drawn into it, whether they want to be or not. The conspiracy doesn't just let you go. Once you're in, it's like you've been marked, and they won't stop until they've silenced you. Lena felt her knees go weak as the weight of Claire's words sank in. Her life had been normal, predictable. But now she was tangled in something she didn't fully understand, something that was far bigger than her, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. I can help you, Claire continued, but you have to understand, this is a war. And you're going to need allies. There are people in this town who have been fighting this for years, people who know the truth. I can introduce you to them, but you have to be ready, because once you start this journey, there's no going back. Lena's thoughts spun in a whirlwind. She had always lived a quiet life, content to stay on the sidelines. But now, she was being thrust into the middle of a battle, one that could change the fate of her town, and perhaps much more. As she looked into Claire's eyes, Lena knew there was no turning back. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. I need to know the truth, all of it. Claire nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Then it begins. But be warned, Lena. The truth is dangerous, and it might just destroy everything you thought you knew. With that, Claire handed Lena a folder. Inside, you'll find the next piece of the puzzle. It's time to take the next step. But remember, you don't walk this path alone anymore. There are others who have been waiting for you. Lena held the folder tightly in her hands, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. She had crossed the point of no return. The journey was just beginning, and it was going to be far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. But for the first time in her life, Lena felt like she was truly alive, like she had a purpose that was bigger than herself. And with Claire by her side, perhaps, just perhaps, she could uncover the truth and stop the conspiracy that had haunted Eldridge for generations. Lena stood at the edge of something vast and unknowable, the weight of everything she had uncovered pressing down on her like a suffocating blanket. The conspiracy that had been buried beneath the town of Eldridge for generations was no longer some distant secret. It was personal, and it was hers to confront. With each new revelation, she had come to understand the depth of the forces arrayed against her. The elites who controlled the town, the shadowy figures who had hidden the truth for so long, were closing in on her. But she wasn't about to back down. Her decision was made. She would face this head-on. But as the days passed, Lena felt the pressure mounting, the stakes growing higher. She had come so far, unearthed so many hidden truths, but now, the path ahead was unclear. The road she had chosen led to a final confrontation with the very heart of the conspiracy, and that meant there could be no more secrets, no more hiding. The names on the list that Claire had given her were of people who had fought against the conspiracy, those who had lived in the shadows, too afraid to speak out. But now, Lena had drawn their attention, and there was no turning back. The final step in this journey would either expose everything or silence her forever. With the list in hand, Lena began reaching out to the people who could help her bring the conspiracy to light. She met with each one in secret, exchanging information and plans in whispered conversations and dimly lit rooms. There was no room for error now. Every move had to be calculated, precise. The clock was ticking, and the enemies she faced were more powerful than she had ever imagined. But she was no longer the frightened librarian who had stumbled upon a mysterious letter. She was someone who knew the truth, and now she had the power to make others see it too. As Lena worked tirelessly to gather the pieces of the puzzle, she began to feel the full weight of the choice she had made. The truth was dangerous, not just to the conspiracy, but to her own life. Those who controlled Eldridge had lived in the shadows for so long, and the moment she exposed their secrets, everything would change. The town, her life, and everything she knew would be thrown into chaos. But the more Lena thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't live with herself if she let it all stay buried. She couldn't go back to the life she had before, pretending that everything was fine when she knew the truth. The people who had been silenced, the families who had been destroyed, the history that had been rewritten, all of it weighed on her conscience. There was one final location on the Y map. One last place that held the key to the conspiracy's heart. It was an old, abandoned building at the outskirts of town, hidden away from the public eye. The building was marked in red, just like the others she had uncovered, but this one was different. It was the place where everything started, the birthplace of the conspiracy that had shaped Eldridge's past and future. It was here that the final confrontation would take place. As Lena stood before the building, her heart raced. She had been here before, but today it felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the silence that surrounded her seemed to amplify every sound. She was alone now, her allies scattered, each playing their part in the larger plan. But Lena knew that this was the moment that would decide everything. She could either expose the truth and risk everything she had, or she could turn away, bury the past, and let the conspiracy live on. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door, the creaking sound echoing in the stillness. Inside, the building was dark, its walls lined with old files and photographs, remnants of a time long forgotten. But Lena knew what she was looking for. The final piece of the puzzle. The truth. As she made her way deeper into the building, the sense of unease grew stronger. This was where it all started. The center of power. The place where the town's history had been shaped by those who sought to control it. The walls seemed to close in on her as she ventured further, but she pressed on, determined to find what she had come for. Then, in the back corner of the room, she found it. A small, hidden compartment. Inside was a collection of documents, old and worn, but unmistakably important. These were the final records of the conspiracy, the evidence that would expose everything. With shaking hands, Lena picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the contents. What she saw made her stomach churn. The conspiracy was far more insidious than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about power and control. It was about erasing entire lives, manipulating history, and rewriting the town's story to fit their narrative. Lena felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Once again, she had uncovered the truth, but now she had to decide what to do with it. She could expose everything, lay it all bare for the world to see. But that would come at a price. She knew that. The people behind the conspiracy had been in control for so long. They wouldn't let her walk away from this, not without consequences. The town would be plunged into chaos, and Lena herself would be a target. She would lose everything. But what was the alternative? To walk away, to bury the truth once again, was to let the conspiracy win. It was to let the people who had controlled Eldridge for so long continue to hide behind their power, to let the lives they had destroyed remain forgotten. Lena stood there for a long time, the weight of the decision bearing down on her. She could feel the presence of the conspiracy watching her, waiting for her to make her choice. And in that moment she knew what she had to do. She had come this far. She couldn't stop now. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. With trembling hands, Lena gathered the documents and left the building. She knew that once she stepped out into the world, everything would change. But as she made her way to the town square, her resolve hardened. She had made her choice. The truth would be revealed. And no matter what happened next, Lena was ready to face whatever came her way.